Hello and welcome to part 9 of the Star Wisdom Astrology course, which is going to be taught by Mercury. So you're probably aware that Mercury is the planet that is closest to the sun. It never travels very far away from the sun. It's always within one sign of the sun sign in the chart, which is okay if Mercury is in the same sign as the sun, but can be a little bit problematic if it's in a sign before or after the sun. So, Mercury is all about communication, and it's to do with the way that we communicate internally and the way that we communicate externally. So, if you think about it, the sun is about your mind and the way you think. But Mercury is about the way that you express yourself. So if you have the Sun and Mercury in the same sign, then what comes out of your mouth or the way you self talk will be in alignment with the way that your mind operates. But if Mercury is in a sign either before or after the sun, then it's going to be quite different. It's going to be a different element, for one thing. And it's quite striking with people who have Mercury in a different sign to the sun that the way they feel about themselves, their essence, remember the sun is about their essence, their sovereignty, is quite different to the way that they express themselves. I know a young man who is an Aries with a Pisces Mercury. So he's quite dynamic and he's always active and he's always into things. But when he speaks, it's very slow and considered and can take ages for him to come out with what he wants to say. But his mind is like this. So it's very useful to know whether someone has their Sun and Mercury in the same sign or not. So this is my Mercury hat, which, as you can see, has been made out of ties. And I see it as a sort of jester hat because Mercury is also known as the trickster or the jester because its ability to speak the truth. And of course, Mercury was the winged messenger of the gods. And Mercury takes, like the sun, takes 1 year to go through the whole zodiac. Now, you may have heard of Mercury retrograde. It seems to be a big thing in the press at the moment. I'm not sure why. Because all the planets go retrograde except for the sun and the moon. They're not really, retrograde means going backwards. They don't really go backwards. It's just that they're all going around the sun and we're looking at them from the earth. So they're not going around us, they're going around the sun, because we're going around the sun as well. But it means that from our perspective on Earth, the planets can look like, if I go the other way, they can look like they're going forward, 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 and then they look like they're going backwards. And then forward, 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 and then they look like they're going backwards from our perspective over here. Even though they're still going always in the same direction, they can look like they're going backwards. But psychologically, it is quite important. And Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year, usually for about 10 days. The other planets, at most, they'll do once a year, sometimes only once every 2 years. So Mercury retrograde is quite a predominant feature in our lives. We have to work with it 3 times a year. But when planets go retrograde, everybody goes, oh, my phone stopped working or the car broke down or, whatever. Really, the intention is that we have time to review. It's a bit like we've written an essay, we've communicated something in an essay, and then we go into retrograde and it's like, okay, now let's have a look at this essay. Let's leave it for a bit, for a day or two, and then come back to it with fresh eyes and really review it and really look at it and really look at what I've learned over that period and what have I now got the opportunity to go back and correct? So retrograde motions is a review period and an opportunity to correct whatever it was that we went through that we like, actually, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Okay, so let's look at the charts. So first of all, I'm going to look at our StarWisdom syllabus. And you can see that Mercury sits down here in what we call the neutral area. In fact, there's two planets here, Mercury and Jupiter, because they're both about learning. Mercury is more about like book learning or the sort of learning that we do at school. And Jupiter's more about higher education or learning through experience. But they're both about learning. And as I said, Mercury is about communication. So it sits in the neutral zone. And Mercury is one of the tool planets. So this is the symbol for Mercury. It looks a bit like a Venus, a women's symbol with a little cap on it. And as you can see in my chart, it's very, very close to the sun. Now, like Venus, Mercury rules two different signs and two different houses. In the old days, as I said before, all the planets ruled two signs and two houses because we didn't have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto at the time. And it was only when they were discovered that some of the doubling up was reallocated to these new outer planets. But so far, the double planets for Mercury and Venus have not been reallocated. So it rules both Gemini and Virgo. And these two signs show you the different functions that Mercury has. So Gemini is an air sign. It's to do with the mind, and it's very quick. It's very fast. Mercury is able to, in Gemini, is able to process things very quickly and able to think about things very quickly. And if you've ever met a Gemini or a very Gemini person, you know that they talk a lot, and they're processing verbally a lot. But it also rules Virgo, which is an earth sign. But Virgo is really good at discriminating. So it's really good at going, oh, so this is like this, but this is like this. And actually, those are quite different. And Mercury is very good at discriminating. I want this, but I don't want that. And that's what Virgo is able to do. Both Gemini and Virgo, you'll notice, are both mutable signs. So our ability at Mercury is able to shift, the trickster. It could be here, it could be there, it could be somewhere else, it could change its mind, it could do this, it could do that. And again, like with some of the other personal planets, Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mercury, the element that they are in a chart is really significant, and it's so useful to know what element somebody's Mercury is in, because it will determine the way that they communicate. So you remember when I said I had Moon in water sign, and so my emotional being is very much like crying, and I'm very sensitive. Well, I've got Mercury in a water sign as well, so that just adds to that sense of it communicating at an emotional level and in an emotional way. But it's in Pisces, and Pisces can be very intuitive, it can be very imaginative. So I'm very good at imagining things and telling stories and coming up with new ideas that are a bit far out. But Mercury in an air sign will be very, very intellectual, very much about talking and very much about mental processing. Mercury in an earth sign is much more practical, it's much more down to earth, it's much more about rules, and this is how you do it, and this is the way it's got to be done. And obviously, is much more practically minded. And then Mercury in a fire sign, of course, is much more passionate, and it's like, if they don't watch it, they can, have quite strong tempers, or they can be quite, sort of self-orientated. So it's really useful to know where people's Mercuries are, especially if they're not in the same sign as their sun. And then Mercury in Gemini rules the third house, which is traditionally the house of communication. So any planets that sit in the third house are largely involved in communication. And then Virgo rules the sixth house. And this is more about service to others. So this is where Mercury can say, what can I do for you? How can I be of service to you? And Mercury is going to teach us about cliques. So this is about how we communicate with other people, but it doesn't have to just be other people. It could be with events or decisions that we have made. So on the left is my birth chart, and then on the right is my daughter's birth chart. So we're going to look at how my chart clicks with my daughter's chart. Now, remember we looked at the different positions within each house. The first area being the cardinal zone, the second area, the fixed zone, and the third area, the mutable zone. So it's really important to understand this concept, because what we're looking for are planets that sit in the same zones of the house, of the same house. And it doesn't matter how big the house is or how small the house is. It's just about whether the planets are in the same zones. So what we're doing is we're superimposing one chart on top of the other. So where the ascendants are on top of each other. Okay, so I'm putting my daughter's ascendant on top of mine, and then I'm going to look through each house. So I don't have anything in the first house, and it didn't matter whether she does or not, because if I haven't got anything there, then I'm not going to click with anything in her chart. But I have my sun in the cardinal zone of the second house, and she has Pluto in the cardinal zone of the second house. Now, I must admit, be honest, I have never done my clicks with my daughter before. And as soon as I saw this, I thought, oh, that explains why we can often be head to head with each other. Because the Sun and Pluto are both yang planets to do with the will. And there can definitely be a conflict of wills going on between me and my daughter. Now, Pluto, wants to get into the depths and the dark and dig up all the dirt. And I must admit, I often find that I'm listening to these really deep, dark thoughts and this incredible introspection. And my son wants to say, come on, lighten up, cheer up. So that can be quite problematic between us. It's when we're looking at clicks, we're looking at the planets that are involved and how they are likely to react with each other. Now, obviously, it can always be high vibration or low vibration. So low vibration, if she's in a really depressed state, which is not necessarily that uncommon, it can be really tricky for me. It's like I can't, my sun, my essence, my light just can't pull her out of it. But if she's in a good place and she's like, I think I need to do this now. I'm really feeling like the universe is wanting me to go and do da 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 da. And then I go, yes, definitely. I totally can see that. And I think that you should. So then we have another click between my Mars and her Uranus Saturn. Now, Mars is another yang planet. So, it's about my action, my drive. And she was of the very short little generational period where Saturn and Uranus were in alignment with each other in the sign of Sagittarius. It's interesting to think about this. She's 36 now, born in 1988. So everybody sort of 1987 to 1989 had this Uranus Saturn. And Saturn represents a mother figure. So this is about how she sees me. And it's in Sagittarius, which is the traveler and the explorer and the wanderer. And certainly that is one of the traits that she really associates with me and that she has inherited from me. She is much bigger traveler than I am. And the Uranus sitting there says, this is a very unusual mother. This mother is not like an ordinary mother. And I wasn't. I was a single parent. We moved a lot. I now live in a van. I'm a traveler, etc., etc. I do astrology. So it's very interesting if you come across any Saturn Uranuses to ask them about their mothers and whether they were quite unusual. Anyway, but we've got this click going on between my Mars and her Saturn Uranus. Now they are both on invert points. So they're very internal. And I've got Mars in Taurus, so it's quite ploddy. It just keeps going, it keeps working. It's the bull, it just keeps on pulling that plow internally. And for her, she's got this Saturn Uranus internally. So it's like her sense of authority, her internal authority is quite unusual. She has some very unusual forms of self-discipline. She struggles with self-discipline. It can be very erratic, it can be very changeable. And for me, that Mars in Taurus, it just keeps on plodding, taking the next step, taking the next step. This is hard for me to understand in her. And for her, it's hard for her to communicate the fact that, for her, her practical sense is very all over the place. It is very eccentric. And so we can come at odds with each other because I feel that she should do things methodically and she can't. She just can't. The Uranus on her Saturn means she has to do it in some unusual, eccentric way. We have another click with my moon and her North Node. Now, a North Node is not a planet, it's a position. We're going to look at that in the last lesson. But it's our direction. It's where we are focused on moving to. And the sixth house is very much about service. So my daughter's North Node is in the house of service. Whenever she makes a decision, she always has to think about which of these choices will I be more of service. But because my moon is in the sixth house as well, it's like I can't help myself. My natural emotional state is to be of service. And so she recognizes that in me. And we definitely have a similarity there. We've both been carers of people, either elderly people or people who are not able to live independently. And then we have another click. So my Uranus sits on her Mars. Now remember, these are in the stress zone. So this, for both of us, this area is quite problematic. So I've had to work really hard on my Uranus, so that it's not stressing me out. It's taken me years to really have the confidence to come out as, quite an eccentric, unusual person. I spent most of my time trying to hide it when I was younger. And equally, her Mars, she's got Mars in Aries. Mars is at home in Aries, and it sits in that stress zone of the DC. So her whole energy is like she's either burn or bust. It's like she's either go, 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 go. Oh, now I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I'm ill, and I can't do anything. And she just sort of collapses. Um, she can be quite argumentative with me, but equally she loves my eccentricity, and she's just as eccentric as I am, really. The Saturn Uranus. But there's definitely a sense there that we're both striving for to work with these energies in a more equilibrium way, so that her energy is more even rather than up and down and up and down and up and down. And then finally, my Saturn is quite close to her Sun in terms of house area. They're not exactly, but I thought it was worth exploring because they are very close. So remember, Saturn is about my sense of my authority, my sense of boundaries, my sense of limitations, my sense of ability to plan and to organize. And the sun is her essence of who she is. It's her light. And sometimes she can definitely feel that I'm, you know, telling her to, do you not think that maybe you shouldn't go out to another party, and that maybe you should take a bit more care of yourself? And she doesn't like that, of course. Absolutely not, because her son wants to go out and party and shine. And she can feel me as being quite restrictive and controlling at times. So you can see that my daughter and I have 5 clicks with each other, which actually is a lot. Ideally, in a good relationship, you only want 1 to 3, because otherwise you're just too much on each other's toes. It's like, it's like we 5 out of 12 houses we're both occupying. It's hard for us to be together in the same space, because it's like, you're in my space. Can you just leave my space for a bit? It's too much. It's too much having you around in my space all the time. It's like we're reflecting back to each other too much. We mirror too much to each other, and it can get very uncomfortable, and we have to go off and take our individual space. So ideally, for a good relationship, you want 1 to 3 clicks, but you really need to look at the planets that are involved. If somebody has a Neptune involved in a click, it can be that they over fantasize the other person, that they're a bit delusional about the other person. Or it can be that they look up to somebody, which might not be the best thing either. It's great when you've got things like your Mercury and Jupiter, because it means that you both want to learn and you both want to stretch yourselves and learn more. If you have Venus and Mars, that attraction of oppositions, of yin and yang. So it's useful to look at which planets are involved and how they are likely to be communicating with each other. Create some star maps of people you know. They do need accurate birth time because you need those house zones to be accurate. Or do a star map for a decision that you've made or an event that you're planning and the start time of it, and then compare your star map with the star map of the event or the decision that you made. That can be really instructive because it can show you what particular aspects of that event are you're working in alignment with, or that maybe you need to be aware of. Like, for example, if it was your sun and the event Saturn, then you might want to be aware that the event is going to have certain boundaries or need planning in a way that your sun will have to cooperate with. And then, yeah, just this is in the green zone, it's in the neutral zone, it's in the intuitive learning zone. So this is a very intuitive exercise. So just look at those clicks, write them down, and then think about how they work together. What does my intuition say about how these two planets are going to work together? I'll see you in the next lesson.